It is a great honor for me to open the first lunch program today. And let me just tell you this. The weather is going to change. I already got indication from our controller because we've been making more money now than before. So our pension has been going up, and the weather is going to change as a result of our pension continue to go up. Thank you, Mr. Controller, to ensure that our working class family who are sitting here are continue to have a growth on their pension plan. Now, I would like to really thank all of you for making this conference another great conference and for your participation, because at the end of the day, this is not even about you, it's not about me, it's about us all working together to ensure that we will be able to address the need of the people in our community. All politics is local. And the fact that all politics is local, we are going to have a great discussion about how to mobilize our people, how to mobilize the vote, how can we increase that participation. My brothers and sisters, that participation will increase and will go up when we begin to really identify the issues that are impacting our community. That when we begin to give respect, as we addressing and we identifying the issues impacting our community, we have more in common that divide us. We have more in common that divide us. And if we can depart from that statement, from that phrase, I will guarantee you that our fight will be less and our mobilization and our participation will increase. Our people who talk about equality and inequality. Well, if we look around this room, we should hold our hands and commit ourselves that we are going to bring equality to ourselves, to our community, and to our government, and to that way that we will be able to have a major participation. We will be able to have major participation in the political process. When you talk about the Hispanic community in New York City with 26% of the population, and only 5% come out to vote, that shows that we as a leader, hasn't managed to identify the issues that really is bothering our community. Because we haven't given them a reason why to come out to vote. You can do that. Because the reality of life is that if we do not give them a reason to come out to vote, just go back to 2008 when Barack Obama had no chance to become president of the United States. By the way, an African American to become president of the United States. How one issue unify everybody. One issue unify the whole country. And we was able to stay together despite the fact that some media, and you know who media I'm talking about, some media was trying to distract. That was not a time for an African American to be in the White House. And those media was fighting, and I watch every single media, whether it's a conservative or not, because I like to learn. And the reason I like to learn is because I don't know much about this game, and I still have a long way to learn. This is about education. And one of the things that I find out was that they was continuing to penetrate this visually epidemic and visually virus that a person like Barack Obama will never be elected to president of the United States. What happened on Tuesday, my brothers and sisters, let me just say this, was not that people was tired. What happened on Tuesday was very simple. I call it two ways. the Republican managed to send a message very clear that the person that is sitting in the White House continue to be not one of us. Either the racism, discriminating against the person who we give them the power to run our country. And we are people in our nation that continue to believe that Barack Obama, the man in command of the 50 states and the territories, that he is not their president. You think about that, and think about how long and how far we have came. You go to the city of New York, we have, and I'm very proud to say this, the first African-American public advocate, Leticia James. And let me tell you, this was not easy for her. First of all, she's a female, she's African-American, and with still a big machismo in politics that believe that only men can get elected statewide and citywide. Well, I will tell you this, time has changed, and we will continue to change this dynamic by electing more women, more gays, more LGB into different positions of power, because we have to make our state and our country that we are Somos, we are together, and like I say at the beginning, we have more in common that can divide us. Thank you for being here. May God bless you. Let's keep the faith. Okay, and if I go to identify all the elected officials that are here, I'm going to get killed because I'm going to leave somebody out. But I would like to say this to you. Every single elected official that are here, can you stand up, please? That way I don't get in trouble, that you can be recognized. Thank you. And last, and in conclusion, it shocks you, I said last like 5 times, and conclusion 20. So I'm glad he's not here because I can dominate the microphone for a moment. But let's have all our working class family and union members to stand up, and let's have all the elected officials to thank them for what they do for us. May God bless you. Now I leave you with the president of the Somos Conference, Cesar Astrada, to start.
Okay, thank you very much. I was told to keep it brief, and I certainly will. First of all, I want to thank each and every one of you for being part of Somos and participating and being present. I also want to thank our sponsors who also make it possible for us to be here. I want to make sure that one of the things is that we need to understand that we have to be together. We come from different countries, from different backgrounds. I'm from Colombia, and we have present people from Dominican Republic, from Puerto Rico, from Ecuador, from Venezuela. And one of the things that we need to understand is that we are not just in New York City, but we're also in Long Island. We're also in Buffalo. We're in Syracuse, Rochester, Watertown. And we need to be one voice. We need to be united. So what I have, my message and what I have to say is Somos Unidos. Thank you very much. I would like to now bring up Wanda Williams, Director of Political Action and Legislation for DC 37 and AFSCME. You can please come up.
Good afternoon. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I want to just ask before we get started, as you know, at 2 o'clock we'll conclude this panel, and I wanted to just ask ahead of time that if there are any conversations. I've been going to some of the workshops, and you can't hear some of the things that the people who have been asked to do a presentation, you can't hear them. So I don't want that to be the experience for our time together, which will be an hour and 10 minutes. So I just ask very politely before we get started that you give your undivided attention to the wonderful people who've given of their time to come to share some very important information with us today. And if I could just be allowed to thank you in advance, because I know that this will be a very great presentation. In addition to your cooperation, will get us out here at 2 o'clock. With that, I want to welcome all of you and to say that this panel is going to be focusing on Hispanic participation and mobilization, and how it is that we get to target specific issues, concerns, recommendations for the Hispanic community, and how it is that we engage in it. So we'll have 5 members of the panel who will come to make a presentation for you, and I will introduce each of them individually, but they will talk about the political participation of Hispanics in New York City as it relates to their particular organization, how it is that they will look at the political participation from both the political process and decision-making, leadership development, empowerment. They'll talk about grassroots organizing, how it is that they use particular models to get people engaged in that process. They'll talk about the historical process of their respective labor unions and how they have gotten involved in mobilizing and targeting Hispanic voters. And then we'll end on the technology that is used in the electoral process and how you very specifically target Hispanic voters in the United States. So with that, I'd like to introduce the first panelist, who is no stranger to many of you. I like to say that she's everywhere. She happens to be on my staff and my right-hand person, and a very capable, young, up-and-coming individual. She is the Assistant Director of DC 37's Political Action and Legislation Department, and her name is Erica Vargas. Please just give a round of applause for Erica. Erica?
All right, thank you so much, Wanda, for that introduction, and thank you all for being here. So I want to just start talking about, being part of the union, and trying to encourage our members to become part of the process and participate in elections. That now we want to focus now in terms of the Hispanic vote. And I believe in terms of the Hispanic vote and it growing in terms of the people that are coming over, that we need to re-educate those who know their politics that are back in their country, because sometimes when they do come over from other countries, they seem that their politics are somewhat dysfunctional. There is no sense of checks and balance over there, but that is actually changing here, right, in America, where you can there is some checks and balances. We can actually be part of the process. We can make decisions, right? So, and therefore, I want to speak about, there was a recent election, a primary election, and that was in the 86th Assembly District, where, Assemblyman Victor Pichardo won by 2 votes. I was actually looking back in terms of the election back in 2010, where there was 4,500 folks that actually participated in this primary. Only 3,774 actually voted. What happened to those 700 votes? This is actually a conversation that we have to try to think in terms of why there's a drop-off in terms of those who are actually not participating in this, these districts. I also want to state that I want to give you all a task as well in terms of how to engage those around you, not only in union household, but also your neighbor, your friends and family. I tend to have tons of conversation with my own family members where they're always asking me, why should I vote for this elected official, right? I have a conversation with them, I sit down, I tell them the issues, things that may actually affect them, just as sort of for example, jobs, affordable housing, even healthcare. These are all things that actually affect our family members and our neighbor. And we have to sit down and actually educate them on issues that they're not well aware of. Some of them may feel that when they go out and vote, their vote is not counted, and we need to change that. And that's why I actually spoke about in terms of the past election that happened with Assemblyman Pichardo, where, you know, if we had that conversation with our family, if we had that conversation with our neighbors, the votes would actually be higher in terms of the difference between those two, right? And I just want to also, you know, connect in terms of, you know, our households are actually, in terms of Hispanics, are very low-income households, and these are services that are actually provided by our own DC 37 members who are public service members, right? And therefore, I'm going to actually pass on, and the next person that's going to speak on this in terms of how our services are affected within our household is one of my own colleagues too back in the union. So I want to have that dialogue. I want to also give you the task that when you go back home, I want you to actually sit down and talk to someone. Ask them what are their views of a Hispanic background, and ask them what do they think that they can actually get out of this country or the state that they live in. And if they do vote, you have a political partner that you can actually speak to, right? But if they don't vote, I want you to actually have a conversation and ask them what type of issues are they being affected by, right? So that person can actually take that information and pass it on, and then they'll see the value of why they need to actually go out and vote, right? That's the only way. That's their own voice. And this is our time now, and I think that we need to educate, empower one another so we can actually come out big during these elections. I want to thank you all for listening, for taking the time to listen to me, and I hope that we can actually have a dialogue after all the panels have actually spoken.
Thank you, Erica. Our next speaker is Ms. Carmen Flores, also from DC 37. She's an activist, she's a member, and she's a staff and leadership for her particular local. I give to you Carmen Flores.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to share some thoughts with you guys this afternoon. My part as being a union activist, and first and foremost, a community activist, we depend on mobilizing. There are three pieces of being able to energize people to vote, and one should be educating, two should be organizing, and the third part should be mobilizing. The reason why we lose a lot of the voting partners is because we don't educate them on the issues that are relevant to them. Every community is a different piece of information and a different need, and they all have their own strength. But we generalize everyone in one category, and we put them in political parties, and that doesn't work. Most Hispanics, when they come from their country to come to the United States, they're not worried about politics because in their own country, the word politics means corruption. So they do not want to deal with politics. I'm not into politics. That's the first word you're going to hear. I'm into my family. I don't have time for this. And we need to start changing the narrative. The only way we change the narrative is about dealing with the issues in their respective communities. So first we begin with our home. Like my colleague said, Erica, we begin with our home, talking, establishing the conversation at home, in your church or your place of worship, in your organizations that you participate outside of your home. And these are, you have community clubs, community centers. That conversation has to stretch out. What is bothering us in this community? Is it a bus stop? Is it a road? Is it the library? What is the issue that is most important in our community? That's where the conversation begins. That's the grassroots. So we're forgetting about the grassroots and we begin with technology. Technology is great, but that cannot replace the one-on-one. It cannot replace that. And that's what we're losing the people. We're losing the one-on-one conversations. When do we have a conversation with our relatives? We tweeting, we texting, we don't even have a conversation. So this is what we need to begin to start focusing on the conversation. Where does it start? How do we mobilize people and educate people how to change things around their neighborhood? That's the first priority, because when you touch people in their heart, which is at home, that's when people start to listen. And that's when you can get people together and group them into doing things that will benefit the greater good. As far as dealing with the union piece, we mobilized the younger workers to take action into issues that are important at their jobs. That's what we do as part of the union. But we also have what is called a labor faith organization, Community Labor and Faith, which we partner with others in our community to deal with the issues at hand. And that takes a lot of work, but also we have to energize each other so that we can do that. In the last year, the workers that we represent at my union, which is Local 1549, we represent clerical and administrative employees that work in public offices around the city of New York. But the last 2 years, I could say the last 5 years, we were dealing with the issue of the Medicaid redesign, which is the exchange of services from the Medicaid program in the city of New York. And I have to give credit to one of the presidents that are here. He's not my president's Eddie Rodriguez, but the president of Local 371, Anthony Wells, energized his members, along with our members, to go to Albany and to deal with the issue of the Medicare redesign. We were facing layoffs of 1,500 employees, which are public servants who are distributing the benefits, the Medicaid services, eligibility of caseworkers, case managers. We have a variety of titles, and they were facing layoffs because there was a team that was assembled by Albany, by the governor, and their interest was about moving the services to the community, but they didn't know how important it was to keep our members to do the job that we've been doing for 30 years. Who best to know the job? Those workers that work in the same communities and been delivering those services perfectly for the last 30 and 40 years. So we began to mobilize community partners, faith-based organizations, and the union to bring that message. And we were very successful. The battle is not over. We want to remain New York City as the exchange, and we're taking the message back. And those elected officials that are here, please work with us. We want to take the message back that we know the work that we're doing. We can deliver those services. We can deliver the services because we know the population that we're serving. Who is best to deliver those services? Those individuals work in the same communities we live. We know what they need. We know how to target them. We know how to talk to them. We know how to deliver the services best. So this is one of the pieces that is important. I'm going to let my other colleagues to talk about other issues, but we can begin that conversation, and I'm sure that there's a lot of ideas that we can present, but DC 37 is on top of things, and we are dealing with all the issues, and we ask for you to partner with us so that we could be out there with the green machine and get the job done.
Thank you, Carmen. Our next speaker is Angelo Alicea. He is a retired member of 1199, and he's going to talk about, yes, let's hear it. He's going to talk about the political participation from a historical perspective, 54 years of the existence of 1199 in both the electoral and the political process, and what are some of the fights and issues that they have been involved in. Please welcome Angelo.
Thank you, bienvenidos. Welcome to Puerto Rico, by the way. It's a little rainy out there, but I have a thing I usually say, 3 rainfalls in Puerto Rico beat 5 sunshines in New York, so that's me. Hopefully it'll clear up a little bit later, and you'll be able to. By the way, how did the golf thing happen yesterday? Yeah, you played? Okay. Por lo menos no fue hoy, ¿verdad? So good thing it wasn't today. Okay, is this thing on? Yeah? Yo hablo bien duro, so I don't know if I need the microphone. Anyway, let me, I guess I'm gonna do a little background here. My partner, Angelo Doyle, my significant other as well, by the way. Mi compañera de 26 años. She's been hanging out with me for 26 years. Strong lady, right? Yeah, there you go. 28, see that? Timekeeper, man. How time flies. I recently retired after almost 40 years of service within 1199. Great years, I might add. And we have a slogan within 1199. We usually say retired but active. Sonia and I were just chatting a little while ago. I said, this thing of ours is like the mafia. Yeah, nobody leaves. You don't retire from this thing. So it's a pleasure to be here sharing some stuff with you guys. Our history goes back about 54 years, more or less, within the healthcare industry. Our founders were originally pharmacists, and Local 1199 was a union made up primarily of pharmacists throughout New York. Our founder and former president, Leon Davis, at some point had the right idea of how about we organize healthcare workers, hospital workers. And a little known fact that, again, going back to politics, our union has historically been involved in both the political as well as the electoral process from way back then, because back then hospital workers were not allowed to bargain collectively. So one can say that our first political act, if you will, as an organization was to convince the then governor of New York, Governor Nelson Rockefeller, to sign an executive order giving the authorization for hospital workers to be represented collectively by a labor union, and that was us. And that tradition has continued throughout the years. I see a lot of number of elected officials which I've had the honor and the pleasure of having participated in their respective campaigns. And I think I don't want to, did we endorse everybody here? Anybody here that we didn't endorse? I'm bold, I'm being bold, right? Well, listen, if we did, see me after, all right? We'll check that out. There are several things that I feel very proud of as both a member and an officer of this union. And we were, I'm proud to say that we were involved very actively in the election of the first African-American mayor in New York City, the Honorable David Dinkins. We were there. We were there to help elect the first African-American president of the United States. We were there. Yeah, you can do that. When mention was made about the political / electoral process, I do that because in addition to electoral issues, our union has historically been involved in other issues as well, from the civil rights movement back in the 60s to as currently as the struggle to liberate the island of Culebra and Vieques from the oppression of the United States Navy. That was us. We were there, and I'm proud to say that as well. I ran into Freddie early out in the hallway, and I mentioned to him, had it not been for the tragic events of September 11, 2001, I'm stone cold sure that we would have elected the first Puerto Rican mayor of New York City. That was us. We did that. We were able to do that. And just to follow up on what the sister was alluding to earlier, how do we do that? How do we, as the union, help to elect and re-elect elected officials? Our how would you say, philosophy has historically been, we have interests. We have interests because healthcare, as you well know, is a very political component. We often say that when we negotiate a contract, we're not just sitting across from the employer, if you will, although they might not be at the table. the elected officials play a major role because the monies essentially are negotiated in Albany. Correct, Jose? And so, the emphasis that I want to place, and before I pass it on, is coalition building. You know, when we talk about the Latino vote, how do we mobilize the Latino vote? We also understand, you know, that yes, there is some apathy out there, but the effectiveness of leadership is how do we turn that apathy around and make it a plus. Someone was asking me, or asked me a couple of days ago when I was sharing with them that what I was going to be doing this weekend, and I shared with them about what the panel was about. And said, well, how are you going to have a get out the vote panel discussion when the election is over? And my response to him is that for us, the elections are never over. For us, what culminated on Wednesday for us is the beginning of, what culminated on Tuesday, I should say, is the beginning of another process for us come Wednesday. I'm a former military guy. And in the military, there's an axiom. It's called force multiplier. And it goes like this. There's a hill. You got to take the hill. And that hill is 150 folks defending that hill. In order to take that hill, you need a ratio of 3 to 1 to take that hill. Now, once you take that hill, this is where force multiplier comes in. You got to defend the hill, which means you got to reinforce the troops that you got on that hill. Elections are pretty much the same. Oftentimes, we elect folks. They forget about how they got elected. They go to Albany or Washington or whatever, and they get lost. I have a thing that was shared, was communicated to me one time by an elected official who I have a great deal of respect for, and I used the word politician. And his response to me was, I am not a politician. I am an elected official. Politicians, they don't serve their particular interests. An elected official serves the interests of the people that elected him or her. And so saying that, again, following up on what the young lady was saying earlier about how do we turn that thing around. All politicians are alike. All politicians are corrupt. Politics this and politics that. We need to figure out ways of how to turn it around. And how we do that, because the focus here is Latino participation, is by having Latino leaders. Although I would add to that you don't necessarily have to be Latino to mobilize a Latino vote. And I'll end with the following. Although we lost a race in Florida, we were actively involved there. We were saying earlier we're not only active in New York, but throughout the United States as well. I personally, in 2008, was all up and down Pennsylvania, then went to Cincinnati, Ohio, and Dallas, Texas. So we move around a lot. Let me end by saying that I, for example, favor a field operation. There are folks there with all this technology and apps and computers. You know, folks are even talking about one day we'll be electing people on the computer. I don't think so. That's not going to happen. I am a stone cold advocate of putting people out there, knocking on doors. The phone, maybe. But the face-to-face, what seems to have worked for us throughout the years is that face-to-face, cara-cara dialogue. We do that with our members, we do it in the community. And I think that's it for me. There's two more people going to speak, and we'd like to hear from you guys. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Angelo. Our next speaker is also from 1199. She is the Executive Vice President of 1199, and her name is Angela Doyle, and she will talk about 1199 today. Angela?
Thanks very much. I have this close enough? Yeah, good afternoon, buenas tardes. And I've just exhausted my conversational Spanish. Unless unless I'm arguing with my husband, who's Boricua, and he's given me a whole nother vocabulary, but I can't use that here. We, we were trying very hard after 28 years together not to finish each other's sentences here today, so I kept pinching myself. Yeah, I wanted to talk more specifically about the 1199 model and how it's evolved over the years, because Angelo was right. We figured very early on that the welfare and the health and the vibrancy of our union and its members was intertwined with the people that are elected to office. And Leon Davis had a favorite phrase: we don't have permanent friends, but we have permanent interests. And this applies also to the Latino community. Now, I just want to say one thing, though, about this Latino community. And, of course, coming from the gringa, it carries great weight. But I've asked my husband for years, why is it, and we saw the numbers growing, of Latinos, particularly in New York City, particularly in New York State. I said, why is it that there aren't more Latino electeds? Why is it that the Latino vote is not as high as it should be? I mean, particularly Latinos that come from places like Puerto Rico. They're American citizens, they're here, they have the right to vote. And folks that come from other countries where political activism is like bread and butter. I mean, in Brazil, you have to vote, right? Although that's Portuguese, they speak there. But why is it when folks get here, what is it about New York or New York City or New York State that corrupts that desire to participate and to be a voter? Because you would control every election, every important election, if there was such a thing as a monolithic Latino vote. And Angelo explained to me very early on, he says, Mom, the Latino community is not monolithic. We are people from different nations. We are people that speak, are separated by a common language. I remember him trying to explain to me why jugo de China is orange juice in Puerto Rico. I said, China juice? What is China juice? So that there's been a failure on the part of leadership to find those common denominators, whether you are Dominicano, you're Guatemalan, you're Puerto Rican from Santurce, there are common issues. And then once you've identified those common issues, build those coalitions. And I want to talk very briefly, because I'm going to let people go. First of all, as a labor leader, I must thank the staff of the hotel that served us this wonderful lunch, and particularly waiting to serve the coffee. We have you all captive here until we finish the panel. What we have done is what my sisters over here alluded to also in 1199. We've developed a one-on-one model. Even before the law prohibited unions from using their dues money to work, to support particular campaign folks, 1199 always had a voluntary political action fund. Years ago, we used to call it the Solidarity Fund. I remember you put 50 cents a month in the Solidarity Fund, you got a nice little button that shows you how long I've been around. Now most of our members are contributing $10 a month to our political action fund. But the reason we had it voluntary is not because, we're angels. It's because the founders of this union were very smart. In order to get a worker, whether it was 50 cents 40 years ago or $10 today, to contribute that money out of their paycheck, it required you to have a conversation with that person, a one-on-one conversation to engage them in why is it important, why is their job, why is their life in their community inextricably, entwined with who sits in elective office. You have to do that. And we now have, and I won't tell you how much is in the political action fund because everybody's going to be looking for another contribution. But let me just say it is millions of dollars, and the way we get that is one member talking to another member. We have drives where we use our delegates to go out, and I think we can do the same thing in our communities. The sisters said it. You find a common issue, whatever that common issue is, and you go out and you engage people, whether it's a voter registration drive. We've done voter registration drives. I remember when Jesse Jackson ran for president, I guess it was, or was he running for, I don't remember. Run Jesse, right. We've done so many campaigns over my 40-odd years in the union, I can't keep track. We enrolled 110,000 new voters in 3.5 weeks. Now, I have to tell you something. Yeah, amazing, right? I have to tell you something. Some of the elected officials, none of whom are there now, weren't happy about it. And you know why they weren't happy about it? Because they weren't controlling who was being enrolled. And they didn't have that link and feel that they had their control over these new people. How are these new people going to vote? Well, if you get the damn butt down below into the neighborhoods and have town hall meetings and talk to your constituents, you'll know what's important to them. And then you'll know how to vote. So what Angelo was saying before, it's true. You know, politicians serve their own interests. Elected officials serve the interests of the people that elect them. So we also do that. We have a board that, our executive board, that has almost half of the board are rank and filers. When we do endorsements for president, we bring that to our delegates. It's grassroots at every single step. The president of the union doesn't decide, you know, in a vacuum, this is the person we're going to endorse. He met with recently with Bill de Blasio last year. Nobody was in de Blasio's camp. De Blasio was in 4th place prior to the, you know, early on to the primaries. And our president sat and met with our executive board, which I have the privilege to be on, and with our executive council, and we debated it out. And we said, listen, we looked at the bona fides, we had the candidates for the primary come in, and we interviewed them, and I'm talking about with rank and filers also. So to the degree that you bring it down to the rank and file, and I really mean that, that's not making a speech, it's giving them the power to vote on something, explaining to them one-on-one why they need to vote, explaining to them why they need to contribute to a political campaign. When people have that understanding, you have people that you can recruit to work on electoral campaigns, that you can recruit to work on your own union issues or your own neighborhood issues, because you're educating people. That's empowerment. And identifying Latinos that will represent the issues of Latinos and building that caucus between the communities and labor and the electeds, I think that's the answer. So I'm sorry I spoke too long. It's something I'm passionate about. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Angela. We have one more speaker before we open it up for questions, and his name is Steve Kremer, who is, it says Kremer spelling, but it's pronounced Kremer. And he is the president and founder of Get Out the Vote, commonly referred to as GOTV, and he'll be our last panelist talking about technology perspective and voter contact programs trying to target Hispanic voters. Steve?
Thank you, Wanda. How many people here have a smartphone? Raise your hands. How many people don't have a smartphone here? In the back, right?
Yours is not smart.
All the way in the back. All the way in the back again. This cycle, there were more people out there with a phone at your door taking information than ever before. This cycle, you got hit with more. How many people got like 10 emails or 20 emails a day? Yeah. And text. Anthony Weiner's not in the room, is he? But it happens that fast. You tweet one thing wrong, and you're out. The email, the internet, all the different things we do technology-wise in our life. We sit there in front of a computer, maybe at your workstation, maybe out there in the field. If you're a Con Ed worker, maybe you've got your computer with you too, doing this work. Every time you're out there, you can collect information on this, on something that you hold every day. You don't have to have stacks of paper anymore. You don't have to bring that back to the office so somebody can lose their eyesight. Everything is synced, everything. Now, those of you who work in politics, and I think that's most of us, we're going to vote. How do we get the young kids, how do we get the largest growing population in the United States to come out and vote for our candidates? How do we do that? Well, what we do is we take what they've just said. You do that one-on-one. You have someone who knows 30 people put on their Facebook page or put in a tweet why it is, what that one-on-one, why it is that someone should vote for a particular candidate, and especially with young people. Because those are the people who are going to actually make a difference, not just next year, but if someone votes and they're 18 years old and they live in Washington Heights, they're going to vote for the next 40 years of their life, and hopefully maybe Democrats, but either way, they're going to vote. But if they don't vote when they're 18, if they don't vote when they're 20, if you don't get them with what they're looking at, which is their phone, if you have a teenager, you know exactly what I'm talking about. All day long, these 16 to 18-year-olds want to have more. Some in sports, some in art, whatever their field is. But they all have one thing in common, is that phone. So we're not going to just call them anymore. And we do. We call them with live calls. We call them with automated calls. But now we're going to hit them with everything that we can, with all the specific issues that we want to put out there. But this is not a one-way street. It's a two-way street. Every time someone picks up the phone, I can tell you that person stayed on the phone for 16 seconds. They're more interested than the person who stayed on for 8 seconds. That makes sense, right? You can calculate that. You can put it into a model that will show you today who is more likely to vote next Tuesday or whenever the election might be. By compiling all that data and using the computer that's available to most of us, we can drive out not just the Latino vote, but the youth Latino vote, because that's our future. Somos el futuro. Now, I'm not going to bore you with a vendors list. I'm not going to tell you who to use for your technology, but I will say this. 2 cycles ago, people would spend 5% of their campaign budget on technology. Now, we're spending 15 to 20%. Next cycle, it's going to be even more. And that includes those computer ads. Geez, I saw this guy, his name's Espaillat. I think I heard of his name. I'm not sure where. You saw it on your computer screen because they were overloading different sites that they knew Latino voters would go to. And they did a great job of being able to turn out the vote. Much in the same way, other campaigns need to take that next step. Because if you don't take that next step, you're going to be left in the back without a cell phone or without a smartphone. No offense. But 2 years down the road, that's where it's going to make the difference. Use the technology that's already in your hand every day. When you send out your team, make sure they've got a smartphone that syncs everything in. When you send out letters, make sure that the mail comes back. Remember, we used to cross them off, okay, they don't live there anymore. Now we do that on data. Now we can cross it and say, okay, we're not going to call them, we're not going to hit their door because we know they're not a voter anymore, or at least not in that location. Use the technology that's available to you right now, because 2 years later, something else is going to come along. It's what, Twitter and tweeting. 2 years from now, it's going to be more than just Facebook. And quite frankly, we have a lot of special elections going to be happening in this coming year. Our governor maybe didn't push the special elections as fast as we wanted them, but now we're ready. And now we can actually make a difference. And yeah, there was one side that won big on Tuesday, but part of that is because they got their message out to people who they knew were going to vote. We got our message out, but we got it out to everybody. Be specific. Use that targeting. Allow yourself to take the tools that give us all that advantage during the day of even knowing where the traffic is and use that with your voter profiles. I'm not going to keep you. I want to thank everybody for coming on and staying for this entire time during your lunch, but really for coming down to Somos el futuro, because you are the future, and the technology that you use will help us to elect more Latinos. Thank you.
So we have a mic that is set up in the middle of the room. And so at this time, I'd like to just ask anybody who has a question of any of the panelists to make your way to the mic so everybody could hear you. Assemblyman, I know you have a loud voice. Tell us who you are when you come to the
Since I
mic.
cannot video myself, I have my colleague do it.
All right. Assemblyman
Very
Kavanaugh, the
quickly,
videographer.
Very quickly, Mr. Kremer, how did you get involved in Bronx politics? Get the microphone. Sure.
I started late. I didn't work on my first campaign until I was 6 years old. Growing up in Washington Heights, it was an easy bike ride to go over to the Bronx. It wasn't until 15 years down the road that I met a family, the Rivera family, who took me under their wing and said, no, you can't just stay over there. You have to do it all over the place. And in the Bronx especially, where we have people who really are passionate because of their background and because of their situation, all of those Manhattan things I was learning, I could now learn a little bit better because I was going in a different environment in the Bronx, and it's completely different. I can't imagine not being in Bronx politics now. If you go in, you're a lifer, period. So not only do I have to thank the chairman, but a lot of the people in this room who helped me to be able to develop in politics, especially in Bronx politics. Thank you.
Thank you for answering my question. I'm just here to say thank you to the labor movement. In 1982, I ran for the assembly. At the age of 38, I said, it's now or never, because I'm not getting younger. At the age of 78, I was successful in 82 because I understood clearly what Angela said. Coalition building is the secret to the success. I am proud to have met, in those days, Julia Jorge from here, District
Here, where is
37.
she? Julia, yes.
Julia Jorge, District 37. That's when my career began as an elected official. Not as an elected official, because when I was interviewed Channel 7, they said, what's different between you and an elected official? I said, I will never change who I am. Most of the time I will look the way I look, like a Puerto Rican bum, dressed like this. But I will never forget how I got here. I am an activist. I'm an activist. There's a difference. Politicians are not in this room. I think Michael Blake is in this room. Can you get up, my brother? He just won in spite of all the odds and everything that was thrown at him. I got to say it the way I say it, okay? I don't mean to make anybody feel comfortable. I won, and I felt that I was all by myself in getting reelected now. I understand that since I've been around for 33 years, first under Mario Cuomo, who, by the way, when DC 37, Norman Adler, came out with a strategy because we could not afford, Black and Puerto Rican Latino, could not afford for Ed Koch to become governor of the United States of New York. I broke ranks with the Democratic organization, and I went with Norman Adler and DC 37, okay? And I endorsed Mario Cuomo. So I've been with the Cuomos for over 33 years now. So the secret is coalition building. And I just want to take the opportunity to say thank you to 1199. We've done so many wonderful work together. With 1199 in 81, we had lost faith and trust in the established party, and we created Unity Party. We went on our own, and we ran our own candidate for mayor. We were not successful, but history will tell you that 1199 tried to go independently. After a while, they realized, you want to win, you got to be in it. You want to win, you got to be in it. We will never be accepted with the Republican and their platform that's always anti-people, anti-working, anti-woman, and anti the aspiration of the dreamers and the DREAM Act. The question now is, where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? From the panel of people that I've grown to love within District 37, 1199. Where do we go from here? And the secret to the success and why we're here is right there, that young man there. Michael Miller, he's looking around to see who's he talking about. In '83, the first thing we did, Michael came to me and said, Jose, I'm reaching out to Latino, Puerto Rican. They don't want to go with us to State of Israel. We want to build coalition, but none of you guys want to go. I say, Michael, I just got elected. You haven't asked me. Are you asking me? He said, no, I understand you just got elected, and you might get a lot of flack, a lot of heat, because they're calling everything a political junket. I say, Michael, I welcome going to the State of Israel. You can put my name down, and we work on Angelo del Toro, and Angelo del Toro went with us. The only two Latinos. And after that visit, Angelo and I say, wait a minute, this is the way to go. This is the right way to go. You know, you build an organization, and you bring people together, coalition building. So we thank Michael for inviting us to Israel, and it was a matter of some 5 years, it took time. On the Mel Miller, he gave us 2 task forces, the Somos or Somos Uno. That's how it happened. That's just the beginning of telling the story. If you want to find out what got us here, you begin with that visit to the great state of Israel. They know how to build coalition. They know how to bring people in so that we can all learn their culture and why they struggle so hard. All right? So what do we do once we get out of here? What kind of follow-up are we going to do? I know you guys are the greatest at what you do. What do we do? Where do we go from here? Do we have a follow-up gathering in the city of New York or anywhere? Do you have any suggestion to the new up-and-coming Somos el Futuro leaders?
Yes.
Like Michael Kremer? I want to hear it. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for who you are, what you mean to all of us in this room. I call you the archivist and the one who knows all the history, and you're the historian, so we thank you for your contribution. We'll go to Carmen Flores for an answer.
I think that first is a great idea that we share the issues together and we make a specific time to meet in the city to talk about it. But the most important thing that we have to think about is how we're gonna do the strategic plan and how we're gonna go from here. So we have to begin with the canvassing of all the neighborhoods. So we have to develop a strategy on how to meet in the different neighborhoods, how to organize in those neighborhoods with the community organizations, with the unions, with the elected officials, to talk about a plan, how to start canvassing and educating the public. I could tell you last week, we did, or this week on Tuesday, when we were doing the, for the elections, and we were in the streets and the neighborhoods. And a lot of the people that know the elected officials that were running, the ones that were reelected in our own neighborhoods. So we have to begin the conversation at home. How are we going to do the strategic planning? And you are one of the elders, so we look for you for direction.
Angela?
Yeah, if I could just add one thing to that, because you're absolutely right. As labor leaders, we represent just DC 37 and 1199 SEIU alone. It's over hundreds of thousands of workers in New York State. Just alone. And you add BJ, and you add, and the TWU, and all the building trades. We're talking about millions of people. So that what we have to do coming out of this conference, if we really want to see that Latino empowerment, if we really want to see a monolithic electoral force of Latinos, we have to hold our union leadership's feet to the fire, including me and everybody else, in terms of the coalition building. Now, we may not always agree on everything, but there is one thing that every labor leader worth their salt that has any sense of ethics can agree to, is that we are concerned about the security of our jobs. We're concerned about health care. We're concerned about the schools. We're concerned about housing. I don't care whether you work for the Hotel Trades Council or you're a member or you're a doorman for 32 BJ. Those are all of your concerns, and they're all of the concerns of the rest of the people in your community. So we as organizers, labor people are organizers, we have to turn those skills and make sure that our leaders are meeting with community people, with each other. With each other. You know, this business of labor being divided all the time over, you know, I'm going to go with this candidate because, you know, they're going to make sure that we get union contracts for the carpenters, and I'm going to go with this one. This is baloney. It's called divide and conquer. We have to concentrate on what the commonality is, make sure we have our stuff together, and then we also can, because each of us individually, we have coalitions of religious leaders and community leaders, but if we combine all those things, if we really try to have labor, and labor can be at the forefront of this, we have the organizational skills to make our union leaders elected leaders rather than internal union politicians, to hold them to the same standards that we hold elected officials. And then, let me tell you something, any elected official would be happy to work with this kind of coalition because they know that damn well they wouldn't get elected without them. So.
Yes. Yes, sister. Erica, you wanted to respond?
I just also want to add that part of
Oh.
DC 37 too, that we actually encourage our members to be part of the community boards, right? That's something that's very important because not only as a union member, but also getting out there to those who do not even know anything about unions. And these are issues that are being brought in, and I think that's actually one step, you know, in terms of finding out what are the issues happening within the community that we can actually take back and spread and share those issues with others as well to encourage them to the process of actually mobilizing and voting in the state.
Yes, sister.
All right, buenas tardes. Me llamo Minerva Soya. I have a question for the young sisters and all my sisters up, you know, on the panel. But it's in terms of building teams and building cadres and teams of people, the density that you have in New York City. How do you bring that density with your organizational skills further to the Hudson Valley where we got a fucking ass kicked, right? All the way. I am very passionate about this. And the reason why, and my story is because I went up to Amsterdam, New York. Hay tanto boricua ahí. There's so many Puerto Ricans there that they call it Amsterdam Rico. That's how many Puerto Ricans that they are there. And when we went to register them to vote, right, it was about one-to-one. It was about face-to-face. It was about education. And there was a sister who was living there 27 years. Right? Finally, right after long conversation, we could only register 10 Latinos out of close to 40 people that we spoke to, and we had to go in front of Walmart because that's the day that they got their benefits, so we knew where our people were going to be, right? So that's where we went. But it was such a struggle. And then once that you got them to register to vote, ellos no sabían el partido. You know, they were putting Republicans, right? And you know you couldn't tell them because when you register, you know you can't tell them what party,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So then it's like, okay, we left, but at least we got 10. But we lost a very important race out there, Cecilia Kachik. And that was in the Hudson Valley. And right now, I think Dee Dee Barrett, Maria, you know, we're still close to close. They're calling those votes. And my thing is that how do we connect with the people? Right? How do we go into the neighborhoods and build those teams? But New York City, we have to go further upstate so that we could educate our sisters and brothers, and not just Latinos, of why it's so important to vote. Because we know, when we hear in the street, people are fucking fed up, right? People are fed up with the political, okay, I'm gonna stop right there. Because me voy a poner como María Cacado. Maria's very passionate, and she's from the Hudson Valley, and we've been working together for a very long time. But enough is enough. Basta ya. And we know we got everybody in this room, man. We got the leaders. We got las mujeres. They just elected Sean Patrick Maloney. He's a real good guy up there in Wappingers, New York, right? In Poughkeepsie, right? Hay mucho boricua. But we need us, right, to get out of our comfort zone. Because New York City, okay, we want more people to vote, but in New York City, we got the density, we got the people, we got the power, we got our skills. We got to train the trainers and go further north, all the way to Buffalo. But nosotros estamos aquí hablando de Puerto Rico. Okay, somos boricua. We know we're connecting New York, Puerto Rico. It's going to affect. La gente de Puerto Rico están hablando ahora how this election is going to affect la gente de Puerto Rico aquí, right? So my question again. Sorry, perdona.
Briefly,
All right, my question again.
and the panel
How
briefly as well. We
my
got
sisters
aligned.
and brothers built this team of cadres so that we can go further north. We have enough people down in New York City. We want to go further north. A coger la pelea, la lucha allá arriba where we got our ass kicked. Thank you. Gracias muchísimas.
Stay right there. Sister.
So, Erica, go ahead. Angelo, you want in as well?
I just
Okay.
want to ask you, in terms of when you have a one-on-one conversation, did you just go straight into the issues, or do you ask the person what are their issues?
Buenos días, ¿cómo está? Me llamo Minerva. That's how I start.
Okay,
Right?
because
And then they soften up, they open up, and then they start talking to me. I want to listen before I can direct and help what I know. So I listen.
So the best way in terms of how we do our organizing is that we have a list of issues, correct? We ask the person, we hear from them in terms of if their issue is education, then we'll just go and talk about education, right? And I think that's the best way to start, because sometimes maybe they don't have a housing issue. Maybe they don't have a healthcare issue, but they may have an education issue. So I think that's the best way. And then once you bring that into, and then you start talking about whoever you're supporting, and in terms of what they've done in that issue, that'll actually bring them and actually motivate them to actually go out and vote and do the right thing for us.
The other thing that I wanted to say was, you
Angelo,
said
you
something very interesting about that you had to meet them at the Walmart when they get the benefits, right? So you start the process. How do you get your benefits? How do the elected officials go and vote for your federal benefits, for your SNAP, which is food stamps? How do they get the Medicare? How do they get the medical coverage? These are the issues. Issues is a word that we don't like to use. We like to say challenges, because we associate issues with problems, and nobody want to identify that they have a problem. So the narrative has to change completely in order to reach out and get someone to listen to us. And yes, we need to build coalitions. We need to talk about how to bring downstate to upstate, to talk about the challenges and how to address it. But the education, like the brother said, begins the day after election, not when it's time for election again. That's what GOTV is about.
Yes. Angela?
The other thing I would add quickly, by the way, some of you may not know Minerva Soya just retired from 1199 and is responsible probably for organizing more workers than anybody, tens of thousands I'm talking about in her career. So her new organizing was her specialty. I think what Minerva is doing, though, is raising the question for all of us to think in terms of staying forward. There have been other suggestions here. That coalition building, it's a nice phrase, but you got to do it. There are vehicles, and I think labor is in the best position to lead this coalition building. We have organizations like LACLA, and I know in New York City, Sonia Ivani, has for many, many years, there are many LACLA members, raise your hands. I know there's a lot of folks here. LACLA, right? Okay, why are we keeping this a secret? Maria Cacado, who you'll meet later, some of you, has been working, there she is. has been working with Westchester Locklear. Any place we have working people, union members, we need to develop and utilize these organizations and grow them. Instead of sitting in our own little meetings and talking about our own little stuff on our own little plate. Absolutely. So, and by the way, and Steve said a lot too, we use the smartphones in the campaigns. We do the one-on-one, but we sync and download that information in our smartphones. So we're combining all of those things. We have our own web page. So that's the way it's true, you know. I mean, Angelo, when he worked on the David Dickens campaign, they tried to give him what the hell did they try to give you?
Angelo, we have to go to we have a last question. We have to close very
They tried to
shortly.
give him a BlackBerry, and he said David Dickens' grandson would be elected mayor by the time he figured out how to use it. Well, guess who's walking around with a BlackBerry?
Yes.
So.
Last question.
Donald Nesbitt, Local 372.
Poll, closing. Before I turn it over to the president of Somos, I just want to thank all of you for making this a very enjoyable panel. If you would welcome me and saying thank you to the panelists for their presentations. And thank all of you for your cooperation of being undivided participants. Let me just remind everybody, tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. in this very room will be the labor breakfast. We'd like to see all of you come back and join us for the presentation then. And with that, please welcome our president of this weekend and of Somos, Cesar Astrolago, please. Better than that, come on. Oh, thank you, thank you. Appreciate.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for participating. And in closing the luncheon, I just want to make sure I have a couple quick announcements. One is that unfortunately, the visit to the governor's mansion has been canceled, so please make a note of that. Also, we're going to begin the next session of panels and workshops in a couple of minutes. So, and lastly, I want to thank the panelists for taking time and being here and enlightening us. It's a great topic and something that is very important to all of us. And I want to thank all the elected officials that are here and very good comments. Thank you very much.